So cool. Welcome everyone. This is session GPS 302, Adapt to Generational Change, Build Your Workforce Strategy. Let's do one click there. There we go. I'm Andrew Kloman, the Global Tech Lead for the Digital Workplace Partners here at AWS. I've been with AWS for just hit now 5 years. I've been kind of in this space for the last 20 or so. I've worked at companies like Citrix, desktop as a service startups, managed service providers in the past. So I'm also here with Senthil. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you everybody for being here. This is Senthil Arumugam. I'm a partner practice lead specializing in end user computing. Been in end user computing side for more than 20 years. Been with AWS for 4 years. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for coming. This is awesome. I'm super excited about it. So, to break a little bit of a wall, the original presentation name was actually the Roaring '20s, and a lot has happened actually in the last, say, 2 years of this decade, right? A lot of things happened back then as well. So a little bit of a play on words there, but I want to think of more of the silver linings of what's happened over the last couple of years. I want to look at what we are going to see in the future. It's a kind of a gazing ball, so predictions aren't always true, but at least from our perspective of what we've seen. The first little bit here I wanted to dive into. So I wanted to start with this quote from actually Andy Jassy, who was the CEO of AWS and now of Amazon. I don't think you're going to have people coming back to the office 100% of the time the way that they did before. I think there's going to be some type of hybrid model. And I think it's probably going to differ from depending on your job function. I can take this off too for right now. So that hybrid piece, right? It's kind of a key thing with even just what we're doing right now, right? There's the in-person version of this, and then there's the virtual on-demand version, right? Which is actually free, so it's actually kind of nice. Anyone can get to it, right? So that adoption to this hybrid model or virtual environments, there's so many benefits to it. It opens up a world of new people being able to have a new experience, maybe in a different way. It may be a little hard to see in this, but the graph up there shows a multitude of different technologies and adoption cycles over time. One of them that I think is actually kind of interesting is simply the stove. It took something like 40, 50 years to a stove to be commonplace in a house, in a US household. I thought that was actually kind of crazy that it took that long. And maybe what we define as a stove in this case is a little different. Yeah, it took that long. If you look at something more like the internet, it's more like 5 years, 10 years. Even a microwave, we're talking about 5, 10, 15 years or whatever it may be in there. But those adoption cycles over the last 100 years have gotten much more fast. And with the adoption of remote work, teleworking, whatever you want to call it, massive jump over the last year, right? I think probably everyone has felt that. So I don't think that's going to change. I think that's going to continue, and we need to build strategies around that to be able to have productive workers, do it securely, and make sure that business gets done. But before I go into that part of it, I want to go into a little bit of a memory lane and kind of do some different eras of what telework used to mean and what it means now. So the term was coined telework or telecommuting by Jack Niles as a physicist and a poet back in 1973. So a little while ago, right? What did technology look like back then, right? It was the first cell phone call was made in 1973. Things like the internet hadn't existed, right? If you're familiar with Gopher, it was kind of like a pre-World Wide Web service. The bulletin board systems, those kind of things. So I've played around with those when I was a kid, and that's definitely not what the internet is today, right? And who was using those kind of things? So pretty much it was academic. It was not really implemented a lot of times. At best, from a work perspective, maybe there's a branch office doing something very, very specific. As another kind of stat, it was like 1966, a telecopier by Xerox was made to run over a telephone line. But it took 6 minutes per page, right? Like, so these things existed, and maybe they worked in some capacity, but in no way were they, what we know as telework or the constraints around that were back then. So then comes on to the early internet side of things. So this is really like the start of collaboration, from that term of like being able to interact with other people in a very broad way, doing things like telepresence, those kinds of things, really like the start of it. Emojis, the consumerization of IT definitely fueled this era. With Apple and the iBook, really the first Wi-Fi enabled laptops in 1999. That was a big push, a big leap in how technology worked for people in general. But from more of a work perspective and kind of a cultural work thing, right? If you're familiar with the show Sex and the City, Sarah Jessica Parker, right? She was like working from home on her laptop. It's probably the first like example of someone working from home. If you're not familiar with the show, she just wrote articles about that topic, right, in a column. But it made it sexy, it made it cool. It turned it from being like purely academic into something that's an actual thing that people use and are able to make money off of, right? But the issue a lot from that era, if you're ever familiar with like doing packet sniffing, early 2000s, you could pretty much pick up anyone's password. So it existed, it was cool, but it was horribly insecure. So things like HTTPS really didn't get going until like 2008 or so. VPNs or PPTP, like that was kind of invented or started really in 1999. A lot of that really was not heavily used. So early internet. We move on to more of what we call at AWS, at least in the partner world, the digital workplace era. So key points in this, and what a lot of customers and a lot of partners look at are these kind of main pillars, right? We want to have a workforce that's flexible and distributed. We want to make sure that we need to improve productivity, but cost is also a major piece of that. We want to raise the security and reliability of an environment, which really reduces risk. But we also want our users to be productive. So when a user's experience is taken down because you have to go jump through 50 loops to get through a security thing, it's not good, right? It doesn't help with an overall business. There's cost associated with that. So this is kind of the same, the main pillars of what we call the digital workplace. Now, how do we categorize that is in these three categories: endpoint management, collaboration platforms, and application management. And I'll get into a little bit more of that. But we see these as being the main pillars of how to build a successful work-from-home strategy. More on towards the business side of things. Actually, to break, so I actually forgot at this point, how many people in the room are a partner of AWS today? Okay, I'd say, okay, about almost half, I'd say. So, from a perspective of what your customers are looking for, it's these kind of main pillars. So from like even a marketing perspective, or you're talking to a C-level person or a management person within an organization, are they looking to reduce costs? Well, these solutions can do that, and we'll talk about more of how they do that. Maybe someone wants to do a bring your own device policy, but be able to do it securely. How is that going to happen? From a shadow IT perspective, I'll talk more about the marketplace of tools that are usually very successful within having a work-from-home strategy, but a lot of the times that causes a shadow IT problem. So how are you managing that? A lot of these stories do come back into a zero trust story. So there's about 10 different sessions at the event this week that dive further into zero trust. But when I talk about it in this context, it's a user to application zero trust story. And we have a lot of white papers and blogs and all this stuff. We could have many sessions about that topic alone. But a lot of these tools help with building those stories out. So business continuity being a big piece, understanding usage. So maybe you do have this marketplace of tools, but maybe no one's using them, or maybe no one's using one specific one. So maybe you get some intelligence around that. I'm sure a lot of people have gone to a customer or an end user and they say it's slow, but what does that mean? These tools help at least build a benchmark to start with, and then understand maybe to pinpoint exactly what's going on and what is specifically slow, or maybe it's just a perception issue. So those are more of like the business high-level perspective of things. We'll go into a little bit more of like the technical pieces of what these kind of solutions look like. So from an endpoint management perspective, IoT devices, mobile, x86, laptops, desktops, peripherals, and that's still included in all of this, right? You need to be concerned a bit maybe how a printer works. There's companies like Printer Logic that focus on just how that printer management works. There's still security within a printer from the device perspective, but also what is it printing, right? So you need to be concerned about all these kinds of things. Another piece that's actually kind of a memory lane thing is, this even kind of goes back to being able to boot a PC off of a network. If anyone's used like Norton's Ghost, like back in the day, Pixie Boot, Boot P, build that machine up. I used to run a mouse, a Microsoft Office certification lab, and that's how we did endpoint management back then. But there's a lot of new, better ways of doing that now too. Anything from more of an IoT perspective, using things like MQTT, or even now with Windows 10 and Apple, and more building that into the operating system. There's kind of a laundry list of things on your right-hand side. So it kind of like lists out one of those technical pieces of what you're looking for. Are you looking to meet a compliance standard that requires encryption at rest and in transit? These solutions can provide for that. Remote wipe, authentication, that performance piece I talked about, right? So these partners listed at the top here are actually a part of a competency program that we have at AWS for partners, the Digital Workplace Competency Program, which actually Senthil will talk about a little bit later here.
Yep.
We get into application management, and we have that white box there with, in this category, solutions like Citrix, VMware, Teradata, Nutanix that all have things like virtualization, visualization, SMB. There's like a million different terms for desktop as a service or VDI, right, over the years. So we have solutions in that kind of category. AppStream, Workspaces are AWS services in that space. Those are all focused really on a desktop perspective and really almost making them more web-like, right? Other vendors that focus simply on web application management, think of single sign-on portals, think of single sign-on and accessing any of those web applications, any of those kind of protocols in the center there. And then again, that kind of laundry list of different feature capabilities of each one of these doing, what these are doing. So collaboration platforms. This is actually where I think a lot of people have gotten probably a lot more experience with in the last year or two, right? So first what I would start off with this topic as being more of the media richness theory. So really the kind of concept is if you have text messaging, right? It's probably one of the worst ways of communicating, but it also can be really simple and easy. Maybe you just need a quick confirmation, okay, cool, done, right? If you're trying to have a conversation about theory, it's probably text messaging is not the best thing, right? So able to have this conversation about theory in person and have more of that media richness or connectivity between other people. So in a lot of these collaboration platforms, specifically in more of the social, real-time kind of thing, that's a key part of it. Forward-looking, there's a lot of VR, AR kind of conversations around that. I have a headset myself, and a VR headset, and I live in the New York metro area, have a small condo kind of thing. I'm not going to have 8 monitors in front of myself, right? So getting into even a virtual environment where I can put up those 8 monitors, and not always 8, right, but some more than just one, kind of gives you a better media richness theory behind that, being able to be connected to people a little bit better, right? So I think a lot of these solutions focus on that. But yeah, so from a content perspective, enterprise file share and sync has been a term, and I think we're kind of moving away from that a little bit more towards content platforms. Things like Nasuni, Cetera, FileCloud, all solutions in that space. More of more into content management, but more of a app feel to it. Things like Smartsheets, being able to provide a spreadsheet of information between people. Monday.com being more towards the ability to have like small micro apps and be able to build in more of your workforce automation components to things, getting more into more of a almost CRM kind of world. So huge category, right? But a lot of these solutions are definitely things to dive into. These are just some of the ones that are in our competency program again, but definitely ones to look into. So now that we talked about a little bit of a history, we talked a little bit about the different categories, the competency program, we'll dive into that a little bit more. But to kind of wrap this into put in more of a context, right? That first slide that I showed with the graph, right? I was actually looking this up just somewhat recently, and on Wikipedia at least, from a source, not a great one, but it was there, is that the work from home was at like 2 to 5% in 2019, and then we've jumped to now 70% from this Owl Labs state of remote work. So massive amount of change there, right? And even more so, so from this survey from PwC, what are more executives looking at in the future, right? So we went from like 2 to 70. 83% of US executives say that they're heading towards some kind of hybrid working environment. So that's even more. This is accelerating. So yeah, there's a big push behind that. 1 in 10 are actually looking entirely giving up office space together. Is there anyone like in here that has the same experience? Are you getting rid of your office space? Yeah? Okay, yep. That seems maybe it's more like 2%, but, or 20% or something like that. But still, that makes a big impact, especially in a societal change kind of perspective. If you in your hometown, 1 in 10 of the cities, the business districts, not there anymore, it's going to make a lot of change happen, right? There's a lot of things going on there. So how are you as executives planning new investment to support this hybrid model? So from the collaboration part, what I was talking about there, 72% plan on increasing investment. From the infrastructure, secure virtual connectivity, so the application management and the endpoint management, 70% plan to increase. So this isn't changing. We're probably not going to go back to how we were back in 1973, right? We're constantly evolving. This has just become more and more important for a lot of people, a lot of organizations. And the big thing behind it is that if people don't, then their workforce pool is really going to be affected, which you may be seeing in the news or in your own offices and places of work. So from a technology perspective, how do we fix that, right? A lot of these applications, from an application perspective, are going to start building in a lot of these digital workplace tools. So again, gazing ball into the future here. Having a marketplace of tools within your organization is very important. Being able to have tools that do automation around things. So think of an email comes in and someone's asking for, okay, I broke my laptop, what do I do now? Maybe you automate that. It says, this is Sarah and this is her laptop and it's broken, and maybe I completely automate that and create a ticket and go from there with creating a new laptop, sending that person a new laptop. So having those intelligent workplaces is really important. And then getting into more of that immersive environment, right? The AR, VR, what is that going to look like for organizations? Having that from a technology perspective and moving it more towards a cultural perspective, having that highly collaborative meted richness theory, those hybrid kind of environments. We're all people, right? So we want to interact with each other, and that it's a very important part of having a happy employee and probably a happy employer as well. So those cultural hubs, right? So we're able to be here in Vegas and have all the joys of this city, and this is just one cultural hub, right? I'm sure back home for wherever you guys are at, there's cultural hubs and places where people meet, and having that hybrid of maybe you don't have an office anymore, but you still need to have those cultural hubs and bring people together. So that's still a very important part of it. Another interesting topic too is more of the democratization of work, meaning more like this kind of opens up so much more people to the workforce and maybe doing more rewarding things that they weren't able to do before. As maybe like an example, maybe a military spouse, right? They're probably moving every 6 months or whatever it may be, right? And they weren't able to do what maybe they went to school for and got a master's degree in or whatever. So now that things are more able to be, environments are being able to work from home and have that flexibility, it opens up the workforce so much more to situations like that, or really countless more other ones. Maybe a loved one that's sick or whatever it may be, right? So that's another important part to it. Frankly, that can help with cost, that can help with just job benefits, the whole thing. Another kind of term that we've seen in the news is kind of the great resignation, retirement, renegotiation. A lot of people, if you've seen in kind of the workforce right now, are switching jobs or finding something that's more rewarding for them. Whatever that may be, it's going to be different for everyone. But each one of these organizations are going to start to be known as being like, oh, well, this company was maybe terrible during the pandemic. And they maybe didn't modernize anything. And they still haven't modernized anything. You still can't work from home, and you don't have that flexibility. In some cases, they may actually be paying people more, but just simply people don't want to work there because they don't have the right digital workplace tools in place for that. That's how it kind of ties back into what the digital workplace tools are providing, are also a part of human capital management, which I actually don't like that term really that much. Hopefully in the future, that whole category of IT and management kind of changes their term, because I'm not a big fan of calling it human capital. It's a little desensitizing. But the idea here is that if you want to have, be able to pull in more workforce acquisition, pull in better employees, be able to manage those employees better, do any optimizations around that, you need the right tools to be able to do that. Now, human capital management is kind of like a whole separate thing of different tools that are out there. But if you don't have the right digital workplace management tools, then they kind of coincide. It's definitely a part to look into within your organization when having these discussions with businesses. And why does it make sense? Why is this needed? Employees want to be able to have a variety of skills, be involved from end-to-end involvement of whatever that task may be, whatever business item they're trying to do. They want to make sure that there's significance of that task. Any of the collaboration tools I was talking about really kind of fit into that world. With autonomy and being able to get feedback, that's more of like the endpoint management and application management of tools that enable people to work better or have more autonomy. They may be able to have a variety of skills and be able to do these things in highly significant tasks, but they might not be able to get that feedback from people. That's also a really important piece to it. So what does the employers want? It's talking about increasing workforce, right? Reducing risks, increasing productivity, reducing the costs around that. Those are all very important parts of building your strategy and from more of an employer's perspective. So now that we talked about kind of the background, the history, the categorization, what these tools look like, how they can help an organization, how do you execute on those? So I'm going to switch from here to Senthil, and he'll talk more about the Digital Workplace Competency Program that we've launched in the last couple of years here, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Thank you, Andrew. Let me find okay. Quick audio check. I think I'm audible. So I'm here to talk about our digital workplace competency program that we have for our digital workplace partners. So this program basically helps our customers to find specialized partners who are specializing end user computing solutions, right? Any solution that falls under digital workplace. So if you look at the services that we have, Amazon AppStream 2.0 and Amazon Workspaces, and any other third-party solutions you run on AWS, like Citrix on AWS, and other products that Andrew was talking about, like Monday.com, Kaltura, Sodi, and there are so many other end-user computing-related solutions that you can run on AWS. So as of today, we have 52 total digital workplace competency partners, out of which 30 are consulting partners, and we have 22 technology partners. So our partner network is constantly growing, and that is a part of my job, to work with our partners and expand our partner network. And I saw a few hands go up when so if you're a partner and interested in learning about getting into the competency program, I'm more than happy to talk about it. You can find us after the session there. So what goes into this partner journey, right? When we mention digital workplace competency partners, so we work with our partners and we build the partner practice with them, right? As soon as a partner decides to start their business with AWS, we work with them, and there is a rigorous process that goes into to make sure we have a solid foundation for the partner to start their practice. For example, we go through our well-architected model and make sure if a partner has a solution and it covers all the 5 pillars of our well-architected model. So the reason why we do this is when our customers are adopting to our services and want relying on the experts who have already done it, and so we build that network and make it available. So as a customer, you can go onto our AWS partner network and find the right partner who can do the solution for you. So, here, I'm just going to talk about some of our partner solutions. So I'd like to use the analogy. So who here did a e-check-in to your hotel or casino when you got in here? I see a few hands go up. It's a amazing experience, right? Like when I landed, took a taxi, walked straight to my room, picked up my phone, and there is a digital key, and got into my room, right? So I think this is, I'm just thinking of this analogy as employee experience as well. Now think about this. Would the casino want their customers to spend time at the registration desk, especially in an event like this where like there is 100 people in front of me trying to register their room? They would much rather like to have you on the floor than waiting there, right? And similarly, when a new employee starts with an organization, would you like your employee to get their systems and get started with their work, or wait there for their systems to be ready and be available, right? So I see, these hotel rooms as the AWS services that are available, right? So, and our partners are the bridge, or the solutions that they developed are the bridge that is going to enable and automate the solutions, right? Like when an employee starts, you can come in and then as soon as you get in, go into the system, request the system that you want, like a VDI or a virtual desktop, and then it automatically provisions your workspaces and makes it available. You're not, you don't have to call a help desk or wait there or depend on some other team to build your system, right? So, for example, Nuance Workspaces Manager is a solution that is available on AWS Marketplace. So Nuance is one of our digital workplace competency partner. And this is, you can subscribe to this service in AWS Marketplace and deploy it into your account. So I've called out some of the key features of that application solution. Basically simplifies the deployment and management of workspaces like we talked, right? And then it is going to right sizing is very, very important, right? Because you pay for what you use in the cloud, right? Do I have to over provision or am I under provisioning so it affects the productivity of my employee? So it keeps, do we really want to have your IT team keep a watch on it, or you want to automate it? There is a solution available, right? So talking about automating and then constantly watching, what is the usage? Am I giving him the right system or her the right system? And also securing the platform, right? You can granularly control what access everybody gets. You can offload some of the tasks to help desk. You can offload some of the tasks to your employees itself, right? Like, for example, if my cloud VDI is stuck in a reboot, somebody needs to just go and give it a hard reboot, right? So if I automate that and hand it over to my end user, where I don't have to pick up a phone and call someone to restart my system, it's that simple, right? So the solutions like this can provide. So there is a portal where you can go find your workspaces, give it a reboot, and 2 minutes later, it's ready for you to use. And of course, self-service portal. Like I said, it gives you a portal where you can go subscribe or get your own workspaces or AppStream instance built, right? Like I said, it is available on Marketplace as a solution, and there is a 30-day free trial for Workspaces Manager from Nuance. Feel free to play with it. And likewise, there is another solution from one of our other digital workplace competency partner, Synchronet Click. Very, very similar, right? Like, for example, you can manage multiple accounts in a single pane of glass, right? You may have different business units where you have different billing models. You want to have, keep the billing separate so that you can charge back and have those systems. But you still want a single pane of console where you can manage all the systems, right? So they have a solution which can do that for you, and automation and ITSM integration. Asset management, always a challenge, right? So how about if you automate and integrate the solution? So the solution, as soon as you provision a workspace, automatically tag your asset and update your ITSM tool. And then, so you can manage who used what and what asset was provisioned, and helps with tracking, right? And then cost optimization, obviously, because depending on the billing model, whether you're right sized or not, it automatically adjusts the bundle size or the hardware size that you use for your systems. And then automatically turns off and turns on your resources for usage, right? And obviously there is delegation of authority as well, which we talked. You can delegate permissions for different use cases and different teams. So Click is also available in Marketplace. Definitely, if you're deploying any of our EUC solutions, feel free to subscribe and use. So with that, anyone here from Nuance or Synchronet? I don't see them. Cool. So moving on, what other solutions are our partners providing, right? Managed services is one of the major services that most of our customers would like to have. Again, I would like to use an analogy of, when I bought my house, I wanted to do the yard maintenance, and when I took a step back and thought about, what do I need to manage my yard? I need to buy a lawnmower and trimmer and whatnot. And I need motivation to maintain my yard. Even if I live in Seattle, it's most of the time it's rainy, and does not give me the required motivation to go out work in the yard. So basically, I outsource it to a lawn caretaker. That's exactly it is, right? What is the customer's business focus area? Do you really put so much efforts into building an IT and hosting your own infrastructure, or use experts who have already done it, right? you can, so that you can go back and focus on your business core objectives, right? So another thing that is easier with managed services is you have a predictive low cost. So you can project what is going to be your cost for maintenance of your infrastructure for rest of the year. So again, I've called out some of our partners who has managed service solutions. Like CloudHisive is one of our digital workplace competency partner. They have a solution called Centricity, which offers managed services as well. Again, automation of workspaces and AppStream. And Virtusa is also one of our partner who offers managed services. And their solution is called Desktop as a Service, right? So with that, our next slide is, so with all that we discussed with Andrew talking about the adoption of technologies taking longer time, and and how the pace have increased, and how I talked about how our partner solutions have turnkey solutions that can help adopt and use the services faster. What we are actually basically trying to say here is it's all about the end user experience, right? Like I've been traveling for my work for years. The first time when I got Wi-Fi on the airplane, that was such an awesome experience. Like I get connected to the world. I can text back to my family while I'm up in the air. And so it's a basic expectation now when I'm flying, oh, okay, Wi-Fi is going to be available. But when in one of the flight segment, if there is no Wi-Fi, it kind of like gives me a bad experience. Like, why is it not available? I'm not able to connect back with my family. And likewise, your employees, are you giving them the right systems? Are you providing them the right experience for them to do their work? Is mainly what we are trying to say, right? So with the solutions that our partners are offering, you can definitely adopt the solution and provide a better workplace experience for your employees. So, so preparing for different scenarios. Again, Andrew talked about what was the work from home percentage in 2019 and how drastically it changed in 2020, right? From 2 to 4% to 70%. That's a drastic change. So who knows what is next, right? So preparing for different scenarios, being more agile with the services that are available, right? And then continuously monitoring your systems and adapting to the changes that are happening with the services. So the takeaway for this slide, I would say, empower your workforce with digital workplace solutions, right? With that, as a next step, I've provided the link where we can find our partner solutions. And you can, in APN portal, you can find all the list of 30 consulting partners and 22 of our ISV partners with a landing page to their digital workplace solutions. So yeah, with that, I think we are at the end of our session, and I really appreciate the time that you have taken. So we still have 20 more minutes, and Andrew and I will be here more than happy to answer any questions. But we have to vacate this by top of the hour. So yeah, any questions?
Feel free to email us too. What's the question? The previous slide? Oh, to take a picture. Sure.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah, this site has a list of all the partners and all the categories, definitions of the categories, as well as if you are a partner, how to become a partner in this space and to reach the high bar that these partners have reached to.
Mm-hmm. So do any of your work with our partner? Any of you use Workspaces or AppStream?
There, yeah. Cool. So hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you reach out to some of these partners and
Yeah.
be able to make use of these solutions to help with the workforce there. So, yeah, feel free to come on up
Yep.
or email us or whatnot. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll appreciate your feedback as well. Thank you.